Another blinding edition of Fuzzy Logic.
Oh my gosh.
I am moderator Trevor in the sunny San Diego sun today. This is your co-anchor Gordon Firemark in the LA Purple Light. Hey Gordon,
Hello,
and this
hello.
co-anchor also Elsie, the podcast pundit Escobar. How are
Oh
you,
my. I'm
Elsie?
well. I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm bringing the Friday vibes because Friday is the day to celebrate a little bit after a long week. So I'm stoked to be here. I can't wait for today's episode, which is Hobby to Hustle, protecting yourself in the creator economy. We're going to get into some fun stuff with some really, really smart people today. Bree, please roll that intro so we can dive in. Thank you. Hey, hey, hey. All right, so I'm going to jump right into it. The mission of Fuzzy Logic. This is the first time we've really stated this. So I'm going to state it. I'm going to let each of you state it and tell us what it means a little bit to you in the mission of Fuzzy Logic in general, even beyond the statement. I think that's really important that we state what our intentions are going into today and going into everything that we do at Fuzzy Logic, which is don't be silent. Start your own conversations about law, ethics, and empowerment so that the people around you can continue the conversations that we start here today. Gordon, I'll throw it to you. What is your take on that statement, and what is your heart and your mission here at Fuzzy?
On that statement about don't be silent, uh, I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
I think that, well, look, I'm a big free speech, First Amendment advocate. And I think that goes two ways. One is don't be silent. Speak your mind, get your message out there, have the impact. You can't have an impact if you don't do things and get the word out there. So that's an important part. But also, as the public, I think we have to defend our right to hear from other people, and not just defend it from the law, but defend it from just bad attitudes and cancel culture and all that kind of thing, because it's so easy for someone as confident or something like that to just be intimidated about speech and being upfront with their thoughts and ideas when they're not popular, I guess you could say. But the unpopular views are the important ones, I think.
Appreciate that take. Elsie, what is the heart of Fuzzy to you?
It's just having the conversations. It's being able to really learn about the things that are going on, to be interested in the things that are going on, and to call out, I feel, at least for me, the intuition that you might have about an issue, that you might think like, oh, I'm obviously not well versed if this is popping up for me first. I think that we often silence ourselves when we respond negatively to something at first, and you'd be surprised by how many people have those same thoughts. And the only way to either learn something new about the situation or see that you're kind of on the right path is by having the conversation. You're not going to learn anything new if you just keep it to yourself. And I know that there's been a couple of times when I'm like, oh, I don't know about that, but obviously I don't know enough to talk about this, so I'm just not going to say anything. And I put myself in that corner, and then I realized if I would have just spoken up in the first place, it might have been helpful to other people too, before we got into this mess, if you will, right? So I think that we all have a responsibility to do that.
I think that the best way to give voice to one's own ideas is to start with listening,
Yeah.
but participating in the conversation, not just passively fly on the wall listening, but actually getting in there and sharing your point of view. Sometimes that's through questions, sometimes it's through assertive statements, and sometimes it's through action. So all of the above.
Yep.
Thank you both so much for getting into that a little bit. That means a lot to me to hear what you each said to that, and I think that's my take on what Fuzzy is to me as well. That's why I reached out to you, Gordon, to start this conversation so many months ago. Was I felt that you represented so many people in our industry of independent media and independent journalism, not just in podcasting. So many people look to you. And your first suggestion was Elsie Escobar to have on here. So I think that we are so honored to have that be the people that represent us. And for me, it was exactly what you both said, was starting the conversation, because I don't always and frequently don't have the answers. This is very new to me, much of what we talk about here. And so I am an interested and intrigued listener and learn here. I am hopefully here to keep us going through the questions and a little bit on topic, but my main goal here is to learn with everyone else, and I cannot thank you enough times, so I will not stop. Thank you.
Well, Trevor, I just want to say the reason I jumped in wholeheartedly into this whole project, the Fuzzy Lawgic show, is, it was Francis Bacon who said that knowledge itself is power. And I view our role here in doing this show is to stimulate conversation, to share some knowledge, to empower our audience to have and express their opinions and things like that. So thank you for bringing me in on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So I'm looking through here, and it says at the very top of here is the most uncomfortable topic for me personally. It's the most uncomfortable topic of all to cover as we think about moving from hobby to hustle, protecting yourself in the creator economy, which is our topic today. And because it is so decentralized, I've been thinking a lot about the word decentralized. And internet productions and digital media is very decentralized. And so it leaves it to us as individuals to decide how we want to approach that, which is super cool. But it brings up a really uncomfortable question for most creatives, which is what happens when we bring money into a collaboration, when we meet some people that we want to do a project with, and we say, what you just said is amazing. We need to work together. And whether it starts at money or works its way to money, Elsie, I kind of want to toss it to you on this one, because you at Libsyn have had kind of a unique perspective, I would think, on what it means for a creator to start monetizing. And have you seen it get sticky with partners? You've seen it all, I imagine.
Sticky with partners, yeah, there's been times when that happens because everybody's investing. I think what tends to happen with podcasting is we start because it's so fun, and then you realize that it's taking over your life because you love it so much, and then you go, oh my gosh, I want to do this for a living, and then you go, how can we make money? And so it's this it comes from an organic place, and then but you don't really think with the business up front, because sometimes you just want to get behind the microphone and talk. And so I have seen from back in the day, people started to do things like that, and then all of a sudden they started to make that consider making money. How do we do that? And it kind of was cobbled together. And there have been times when in some relationships, like maybe like a co-hosted type of a vibe, there have been falling out. I mean, things have fallen out. There's been times when people have gotten divorced. If it's like a partner type podcasting vibe, there's been people who have gotten into fights, and it's been really, really badly. There's been some bad stuff personally that has happened to some podcasters. There's been times when like one side has hijacked another, like the feed or the account.
Ew.
And it's, it just becomes very, very challenging when it comes to money. And one of the biggest things that we've seen as of late was, the big fallout that Call Her Daddy had back in the day, like right at the beginning of that whole thing. The two co-hosts were really at the core of a really massive like disagreement that could have potentially been incredibly harmful for so many people involved. And there was a lot of stuff that went down. Thankfully, there was a lot of conversations and things got figured out, but it was really bad dealing with millions of dollars of negotiation there, right? So you really do have to kind of, at least idealistically, mission wise, be in alignment with whoever you're collaborating with at minimum, without even talking money, but just like, what do we believe in? Because gosh, it could get nasty.
Yeah, these co-host collaborator disputes and things. The history of podcasting,
Yep.
short as it has been, is really peppered with those kind of situations. I mean, you go back to the very early days. Adam Carolla, started up his show and brought on. Well, he worked with the team. Actually, they brought him in, and not too far into it, they found themselves being told by other coworkers that they were out, and it was just a weird. And it was multiple years of fighting and litigation and all that. And so, I talk a lot about, in the podcasting space, the need to have what I call a podcast prenup. And it's really the getting it on paper part of articulating, what does this relationship look like? Because if you can have that conversation early enough, you avoid a lot of the misunderstandings and miscommunication. You end up talking about some hard topics before that's a lot of money in, coming out of people's pockets, and a lot of investment of time and energy and passion in the things. The earlier, the better to start having these conversations, even when it sure feels like, well, we're just going to do this thing for fun. It's kind of a hobby. Hobbies don't always stay hobbies. They become businesses. And I advocate for a business mindset from the very get-go.
Yeah, no doubt. It gives you that sense of protection too. That's one of my favorite parts about looking. Anytime we're talking to a podcaster or a show creator or a musician, like Bree and I have met some leaders in our travels, and that's one of the first mindsets I want them to have, is to think of yourself as a brand first. Stretch for podcasters a lot of times is to think of the brand, and the brand is the name of your show. And then eventually to work them towards that business mindset, because one of the really greatest protections I think you can give yourself is to register yourself and start treating yourself under tax law and to your friends and family and coworkers as a business, because it really does hold. To me, when I started learning about what businesses can do, I was like, oh yeah, that's the key. Like, that's the key to surviving your own side hustle. But because of the way businesses are treated and protected, do you agree with businesses being protected better than individuals sometimes?
Well, I'll say, like in really any relationship, I think benefits from, putting a frame around it, giving it some structure, because structure can be very comforting. Even in a romantic relationship, you start out, it's all just fun. Let's go, let's do some dating. Let's, do what we're doing. We'll hang out, whatever. But at some point, somebody starts to feel uncomfortable about the future, what's going to happen, and so on. And so you end up having that hard conversation. What are we calling this thing? Right? Same is true in any kind of a business relationship or a collaborative relationship, whether it's for profit or not. I think we just have to have those conversations. The structure provides a layer of comfort and a framework to work within. And so, yeah, I think business structures in particular, we can talk about that a little more, but business structures in particular are a great way to start outlining the relationship. Who's responsible for what? Who gets what? Who puts what in to the in terms of money, in terms of effort, and those kinds of things. And again, the sooner the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with also people growing in the same way that, with a romantic relationship, whatever other relationship, where people grow apart, or your feelings at the beginning change to different feelings later on. And it is just a growth thing. Like, I know there's been a couple of podcasts too that I've been a fan of. And then I've seen that, somebody gets married, and that's what tends to happen in a lot of the podcasting situations. Podcasting tends to be longer term, that it tends to be longer term than other types of media out there. And so there is that opportunity for growth, and life gets in the way. People move, people get married, people have babies, there's loss in their lives. And so there are different types of values that change in that lifespan. And I have been a fan of some podcasts that, one of the people got married or had a baby and just was not able to record. And I know what that feels like, because I also kind of went on hiatus a little bit from recording. When you have babies, as the mom,
Mhm.
it's very challenging to sit down for an hour or
Yeah.
even 30 minutes and just record, because you're constantly having to manage all this stuff. So it tends to be that. And I've also seen people leave the show and then come back to the show. So that's
Mm.
also a thing that tends to
Yeah.
happen. But you have to think about it even more. I think if creators are getting into it nowadays, I think you should really think about it from that perspective, because podcasting tends to be a little bit of a longer thing.
And not just the people having life interfere, and well, death also interferes sometimes.
Yeah.
People get sick and can't do their thing,
Mm-hmm.
and either they just disappear, or they just have to suddenly step away or whatever, and that leaves everybody in a lurch if you haven't thought through and talked about what happens if. What are the
Yeah.
and one of the ifs is if and when we start making money. One is if somebody can't do it anymore. Who gets to keep going with the show? How does that work? How do we buy each other out of the investments we've made, or whatever, the interest in the future? Can we bring in another guest? The question on the screen right now from Liz says, "How do I make the move to find a new co-host when my current co-host stopped showing up? What rights do
Ooh.
I have with the podcast?" Well,
That is such a
Ooh.
great question. Good job.
That
What do
is.
you think of that, Gordon?
Thanks,
well,
Liz.
when two people come together, this is copyright law now. I'm going to bring this into the equation. First of all, when two people come together to do anything, form a business, form a venture, the law has a term for it. If you don't have something else set up, it's called a partnership in the eyes of the law in most places. And partnership law does have a set of established parameters for what you do if a partnership is no longer working. You dissolve the partnership. Well, if you've got a podcast, that's got a sort of a life of its own. And what happens when you dissolve a business? Most of the time, you're closing down the business and you're paying off the bills and dividing up the assets. Well, if someone wants to keep that podcast going, then they have to buy those assets from the partnership and those kinds of things. So again, good reason to have a conversation about it. So that isn't the way you don't want to shut down the podcast. What do you do about getting a new co-host? Well, first you got to work out the relationship with the old. If they're just not there, invisible, at some point you send them a notice and you say, "Hey, don't know what's going on. You're not around. We're done. Thanks very much." And reach out and we'll figure it out. But yeah, bring in a new co-host. Now, definitely you want to have these conversations and articulate that relationship. And maybe one is the owner and one is more like a contract worker or an employee. And doesn't own the business in case things go wrong again later.
Yeah, that's a really, really great example. I'm sure that happens a lot with people are always saying there's too many podcasts, which is just patently untrue, but there are a lot of podcasts. So every day I think it grows in likelihood that is happening.
Yeah.
Question though, what happens if there's not money involved in that? Is there any legal concern that Liz might have if there's not dollars and cents being exchanged with her current show?
That was the point I started in and then went on a tangent about partnerships. Copyright law says that when two people come together to create a work protected by copyright, which is pretty much anything you might create, they are co-owners of that thing, and those things have some inherent value. Maybe not a lot, but still, those episodes jointly belong to the two co-owners. And so, again, got to figure out what's going to happen with those, who gets them, and the other assets of the podcast partnership or collaboration are things like the accounts with the various providers, the RSS feed itself. You talk about, in a divorce, you talk about who gets the house and kids. Well, the episodes are the house and the audience is the kids. And you've got to figure it out. Who gets to keep in touch with that audience? And so it may not be making any money now. It may not have generated. It may have just been a cost center for the first couple of years, often is the case with podcasts. Who laid out the money for those costs, if not equal? And how do we account for that? So you can get lawyers and accountants involved and spend 5, 10, 20 times what you spent just putting the show together, trying to figure it out. So it's better to have the conversations early.
Yeah. Have you seen any transition over the years, especially recently, Elsie, with more money coming into podcasts, where you see people getting into that early and often? Do you find that association, like helps with that too, because there's places like She Podcast, there are networks now. Are these new entities to support podcasters and collectives? Are they helping at all with this type of stuff, do you think?
I do know that in the She podcast that this question comes up a lot, and there's a
Mhm.
lot of people having the conversation more than we did back in the day. I know that when I started podcasting, no one was talking about this stuff. Like nobody was getting into it with even a future vision of partnership. Like it was, you just did stuff, right?
Mhm.
And I think now I see that question come up a awful lot where people are either looking for co-hosts with a very clear uh, outreach for that co-host, or they're saying, what do I need to have in place in order for me to do this? Have you looked for, like, they're very clear questions happening all the time. So at least in our group, there is that conversation is happening on the daily a lot of the time. So
Nice.
it's something always to be paying attention to for sure. And it keeps coming up. So I know people have it top of mind.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that it's coming up more. I hope that there are so many collectives out there. There are so many networks right now. Like there's this huge explosion of places for podcasters to gather, I'll say loosely. And I hope that this is a conversation that they're offering to people and having, because a lot of it, I'm just going to say it, a lot of it seems like, how do you be a good guest? How do you be a good host? And there is so much more to this being successful than being a good host and being a good guest and finding a million podcasts to be on to support your show. So I hope that people will take this back to their groups and maybe call a Gordon or call an Elsie and say, hey, will you join my group and tell us about all this stuff that you've experienced? Because that is a huge asset and value standpoint that people bring. You're not the only ones. It's like, go find somebody who knows and has been through this to help your group. Like
I
if
think
you have a group.
There's something else that needs to happen though, which I think that doesn't, unfortunately, to some degrees. I'm a little bit partial to listening to conversations like this on podcasts because I learn a lot. I connect with people. I find that whole like know, like, and trust aspect of things where I really trust the voices. I've learned so much from Gordon already, just from his conversations that he's had in the past and speaking opportunities and things like that. I am a little bit less comfortable with those conversations happening on groups at times because there are, as we've discussed in other episodes, there are people have other reasons for posting, right? They're selling their stuff. They're wanting to pitch their services. They're looking to make money. They want to it's not about manipulation. It's that there is not as much disclosure when having these conversations within groups. And I have seen people start conversations just so that they can come in there and make their pitch in the discussion,
Throw the bomb, stir up trouble, and then
come in with even not even throwing a bomb, just going like, have you heard of people who, draw up partner agreements? ?
Yeah.
And then like people go like, oh, so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so. And then like they'll come in there as a poster going, oh I know, I've actually worked with somebody, and they'll pitch somebody specifically. So it's like, it's this. And so I feel like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that. And then we now have to like, don't talk about other business. Like we have to be moderators in that respect and trying to really discern, is this person trying to be helpful, or are they trying to like be really coy in the way that they're putting stuff out there, right? So I'm not particularly keen on that. I'd prefer to say it straight out. Like I have a program, or I have a a service that I do that does this all the time. This is what I've learned in this process. I work with people, and just straight up say that. I feel that on podcasts better than when you're writing stuff. It's I don't know.
Yeah. Well, in that spirit, in the chat just now, Bree posted a link to a podcast co-host agreement from Easy Legal Templates. That is my business. So enlightened self-interest. I am here to share the truth, but I do provide legal services and legal products for folks. And when I say get it in writing, I mean it. And I don't care if you use my tools or someone else's, but please get it in writing. I try to provide something accessible price-wise and information-wise, and that's the game. So I am, in a sense, what you're talking about, Elsie. I'm the guy who gets recommended in the group.
No, but the thing is, it's like, I think that part of it is that we want to have, like, I don't understand, like, there are times when you really have to say, like, I'm being helpful here. Like, you really can, like, this is my product and I created it because I've seen people get in trouble and I'm here to help.
Yes.
Versus coyly leading a conversation that's not helpful or that it allows for engagement. Like, I've seen that too much. People, because when you start to draw boundaries, and human beings are so creative. If you say, like, you can't post links, they'll, like, be circumventing all kinds of interesting ways of how to do that, you know?
If it feels smarmy, it is smarmy.
It feels smarmy, and it'll just catch you. So again, I'm saying that is out there for sure. Trevor, thanks for asking the question. Yes, communicating with one another and bringing these conversations out in groups that are created. Perfect. I tend to, if it's in a group, it is not going to be happening in a group of 20,000 people. It's just not going to be happening. I'm not going to trust it that way. And so Podcast is a group that is over 20,000 people. I would trust a smaller group of people, like 10 that smaller places, emails back and forth. Hey, can you refer me to somebody, when it's this type of a vibe versus, hey, does anybody have a lawyer?
Well, right, but I'll push back a little and say you have 20,000 members. So is there a burden to help them with that?
Because we're not making money off of the group. It's a free group. It's like there's only so much we can do to provide a service for folks.
But that's why money.
If we had said, you join She Podcast, you pay X amount of a month there in order to just post and participate in that Facebook group, then we have, you're paying us for a service. And these are the things that we are going to be put forth. It is it's a public group, and we do have a paid membership, but the people that tend to pay for anything, as we have seen by the layoffs happening even at BuzzFeed and general journalism that is so incredibly important for most of us, most people don't want to pay.
Yeah. It's interesting. The word that keeps coming back to us every episode, we use the word transparency. And, once again, if you're in these groups and you're, well, first of all, if you're looking for advice from the internet, the web, the group, whatever, yes, there is some value in crowdsourcing the answer to a question. But at the same time, if you're going to do that, you do have to really be thoughtful about the source of the information you're getting. And seeking that transparency. If you just go into that group and say, hey, does anybody know a lawyer? And someone who has a close relationship with me, or I give a discount to, or something like that, is saying, well, you got to use Gordon. Maybe there's another question. Have you used him? Are you a paid client, or are you his sister-in-law? Those kinds of things.
Right. I appreciate you both humoring me a little bit on that. I agree with you wholeheartedly that crowdsourcing is generally a more risky way to go about it. I think anytime a group, though, can provide that type of insight, because they do have the power in numbers, which is kind of where we're headed with this. Like, the power of numbers is an appealing place for someone respectfully, to someone like Gordon. Like, Gordon has achieved a certain level of respect in his industry. Elsie has achieved a certain, there are other people who have achieved a certain level of respect in the industry where they're only going to speak in sometimes to a certain type of group and a certain size of group. And I think that provides an opportunity to get the most transparent, to get the best. Like that, when I thought of who we could partner with, I thought of who is the best. Like, who is the best at what we want to talk about.
When we started talking about the power of numbers and strength in numbers, that was really in the context of the power dynamics and the imbalances that we sometimes see. Because yes, we talk about getting it in writing, get your relationships down in writing, and so on. One of the things is, when you're doing business or getting into a situation with a company, a podcast hosting or network or a platform or things like that. They're businesses. They're going to do the right thing and get things in writing and build the relationship the way that it suits them to do that. And I think we were talking about a lot of creators, especially from underrepresented groups of one sort or another, find themselves being taken advantage of in those situations. And so when we talk about strength in numbers, I was pointing in the direction of things like labor unions, trade associations, even just groups getting together and sharing their knowledge, their information, and their power by telling each other, hey, here's what I got in my deal. Here's the negotiation. Here's how it went, or here's what I asked for. And sometimes the companies try in the contracts to limit your ability to do that, confidentiality clauses and things like that. Confidentiality clause is definitely a power play, something to be aware of. It's important in many instances, but when the company tells you can't, well, if the company puts a confidentiality clause that says you can't tell anybody about the terms of this deal, that kind of thing, what they're saying is, we're paying you a lot of money, but we're not going to pay everybody that way. So don't tell anybody how much you're making, because then they come and ask for, hey, I know so-and-so is getting it. That's the wielding of the power in one direction or the other. So it's important to just be mindful of that. Most of the time, if the confidentiality clause is in your contract, it's because they're paying you a pretty good amount of money, and they don't, you're going to take the money rather than get rid of the confidentiality clause. So but again, you at least have to be aware of that power dynamic. And as creators of color, of various gender assignment and gender identity issues, various ethnic groups and so on, it is worthwhile to talk, at least in the abstract, about the kinds of things to expect in your deals. Hello, Luna.
This commercial break brought to you by We All Got Cats and Dogs and Turtles during COVID.
Yes, indeed. So, creators do have power. A couple of ways creators have power in their relationships with the world. One is, you got the microphone, you speak, you've got a voice that many people don't, or don't choose to exercise. So that's one form of power. Creators have power because if the company wants what you're doing and likes and sees an opportunity to make money from it and wants to bring you on board, they come and make you an offer. That offer is not the best offer they're going to make. It's the first offer they're going to make. And so you have the power to negotiate. And frankly, the most important component in any negotiation and the strongest power is a 2-letter word, NO. Saying no to a deal. That's where your real power comes from. And you'll quickly determine the balance when you say no or lean toward no, and they pull you back in or not. So and then of course, in the group construct. And by the way, as audience, we also have power. We can boycott, we can choose not to listen, not to consume. It's been characterized as cancel culture, but you know what? If you don't believe in what a product or a service or a voice is saying, that's your answer. Don't listen. Don't consume.
Cancel culture, I love the concept, but it's such a vacuum. Like, there's so many instances where it doesn't align with my values, or literally doesn't work with my ethics, so I'm out. Like, sometimes it gets such a bad rap where it just offends. Like, it doesn't work. Like, what you're doing is bad, so I'm leaving.
I mean, which is exactly Twitter, what happened when you had boycotts in the civil rights movement, right? We had the people either going on strike is one kind of a power thing, but what would have happened if the white power culture in the 60s had labeled the boycotts as their attempts to cancel us? And if that had gotten any traction, right? The boycott.
I mean, they did. I mean, I would say, like,
in a sense, they did.
That's how people that look like us have characterized it for a long, long time, I think.
Yeah. Well, the victors. I guess if you win, you get to write the history, and in those cases, the boycotts worked. So.
I want to throw Elsie and get your kind of. I know you have a lot of feelings about this, and especially about strength in numbers and how to make the most out of the numbers you have, and also, I think, how do we treat people and groups that have less numbers with increased power regardless of their numbers because of the importance of it, even if they don't necessarily have a majority in the conversation.
I think that's the part that we need to address, is that we always take care of the people that have the least power all the time. So part of how we try, or I try, or we continue to build products, and it's really, really rough to be able to do things like this because it requires a lot of time and attention and resources, is that we try to design our the safety mechanisms, the feeling of being welcome and being able to provide support to those that are the least protected first, because in doing so, it generally benefits everyone, right? So that's how we move through being able to do stuff like that. I know for me, like, there's obviously I am a healthy human being at this moment. I have use of all of my limbs. I can walk well. I have a powerful body. I'm an able-bodied person. But when I had my two babies and I had to be going into museums, and I really used the bus a lot. When I was a young mom, like I used to travel with my two babies, like 3-year-old and my little baby, on me all the time, carrying my stuff. I was able to use, like, the bus driver would come in and he would lower the whole thing for me, and I would climb in there and go and have my own stuff, right? And then I was able to push my kids up on ramps and be able to get into the library and make it easier for me instead of having to go up the stairs. So that wasn't built for me. That was built for folks that were using, wheelchairs or any of those little carts. I'm not sure what those are called, but to be able to go up and down so that it was serving somebody who wasn't able-bodied. So it always ends up benefiting me. Like, even when I'm I'm watching Netflix or I'm watching YouTube videos, like I tend to watch videos with a caption because I happen to have ADHD, and it's so much easier for me to be able to understand things by reading the caption. So I listen by reading. And that wasn't created for me. That was obviously not created for me. And so in taking care of those that are generally the one that needs to be, that can be harmed faster and tend to be overlooked most of the time, we tend to serve the whole, and our whole society rises up.
But what's interesting about all that, Elsie, is all of the things you just mentioned came as a result of long, hard battles for equal treatment by these groups that were underrepresented, served. And it was only after they got together as groups to exert that power and say and speak up and be heard that these things finally came about. And fortunately, I guess you could say, we had leaders in government and in society who were willing to listen, even though they were maybe not the majority. Let's face it, the number of people who are disabled in wheelchairs in America, in the world, is a relatively small percentage of the overall population. But so to the credit of those who were willing to listen and amplify those voices, we've gotten some of those things done because they recognize, as you said, serving the few can sometimes serve all. And we need to focus on that. And the same should be true in our deal making, in our business relationships that we get into as creators, as consumers of content. Exerting that power, getting together and using it wisely and reasonably and in a measured way. But at the same time, if something's not right, stand up and say so. Stir it up.
Yeah.
Stir it up.
Thank you both. I get so emotional about this part of the conversation every week, if we get to have it. And I'll say, when I set out with Numospect, with the media portion of it, the only reason I got involved, because I don't know anything about media, is because I saw a void in the marketplace, and it continues to be a void in the marketplace of people that serve people that are not me. Like, the farther you look demographically from me, the more screwed people have been in history, and the more screwed people get still with the way they're paid. Like, if you only need one metric, look at the way people are paid. in this country. That's all you need to look at to know
Yep.
that we need to still be extremely intentional with the way, not only that we build our businesses and our podcasts and our media, but the way that we try to focus who we serve. So I have, it's not because I'm special. It's where I wanted my attention to be, because I know I have so many blind spots with people that don't look like me, that I set my intention to serve those people first, or most often, figuring that white dudes will find their way. We always do. Um, I just want to encourage anybody who might be out there listening to get on board with this conversation and start your own in your own groups and build your own groups to advocate for people who are like you, and find people like Gordon and like Elsie who will join your groups and advocate for people. That is the power, is advocacy. And you don't always need a huge number of people to do it. You just need somebody to tell you that it's okay. You need somebody to tell you that you're on the right track and that what you're doing is legal, and keep pushing. And these two people will give it to you. They've given it to me. This is the most important part, I think, of the entire conversation we get to have, is the ethics of it. We talk about the legal, we talk about the business, we talk about the dollars, but what is right in your heart is a really good place to start. Elsie, thanks for not giving up and getting on the bus and doing your thing, because a lot of me would have been like, it's too. Cheers. I want to take a second. I love to cheers moms. I'm going to cheers all moms who not only leave the workforce, but come back and lead us in the workforce.
Oh my God.
Yeah. All the love to the moms.
Mother's Day is coming up in a few weeks.
Mother's Day is coming up. That's right. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Let's talk about it.
Amy is asking a question in the chat. I'm going to take the liberty of just responding. Gordon, earlier you brought up about hobby versus business, and you said to think like it will be a business. And she says she was given different info earlier on. And the question is a podcast considered a legit business, or do you need to have an LLC or anything, bank account for taking funds in? Well, look, when I say think about it like a business, I mean be business-like in your thinking.
Yes.
Figure out what
100%.
the relationship is, figure out what's the plan, have goals and objectives, and establish those relationships. That may mean setting up an LLC or something, or just having a written contract, partnership agreement or something, because the fact of it is, two people come together and do things together, they're going to look like a partnership to the outside world, whether they're making a profit or not, whether it's their intention to be a business. The law is going to treat them like a business in many ways. So my point here, I guess, really is at least have it in your head that that's the case, that it's going to look like a business. If you're going to start bringing in money, I'm not a tax specialist, but you're going to have tax consequences for if you're bringing in money and you have to split it up. One person takes the money into their bank account. Okay, that looks like income. How do you pay the other person their share and make sure it looks like an expense, so you're not paying one person paying all the taxes on the revenue, that kind of thing. If you're just one person doing it, no, you can do it as a sole proprietor, and that may be fine, especially in the early stages when you're not making money and you're not doing big risky kinds of things. My feeling is that one of the fundamentals, though, is to at least have the internal conversation about what's this going to be. And do I need the protection that an LLC or a corporation offers, which can be protection against various kinds of liability that would otherwise come right at you, the individual, and maybe expose your personal assets to risk. If you end up doing defamation or infringing a copyright or breaching contracts, is it a company that's doing those things, or is it an individual? And it is a bit of a gray area sometimes. So, if you're not making money, that's a cost-benefit analysis, Amy. If you're not making money, it's considered a hobby. Well, no, not really. There are plenty of businesses that don't make money that the IRS still considers and treats it as a business. But the cost-benefit analysis is, look, there's maintenance cost of running an LLC or corporation. It varies from place to place. Here in California, it's very, very expensive. In other places, it's $50 every year to keep your certificate active and things like that. So you have to make that cost benefit analysis and just decide for your particular business, Are you going to form a company? Are you going to do? But opening bank accounts, separate bank account for the enterprise makes a lot of sense, just so you can run the expenses. Even if you're a sole proprietor without a corporation or an LLC, you can run a Schedule C on your tax return for the business and run some expenses through that. And the IRS, you're right, if you go years and years and years without generating a profit, then they say, well, it's just a hobby. But it's worth thinking about it. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
I see
questions.
what
A lot of
it's
confusion.
yeah, and Amy, I see what you're saying, that there is, it's yeah, it's sort of yes, this is semantics. You're talking semantics here. You're talking about the specific definition of what
Yeah.
a business is. I get that. I totally understand that. And I absolutely agree with what Gordon is saying, that you've got to have that mindset, or at least the awareness of the possibility of the things that are going to be happening. There's many of us who you know, like in terms of I want to be a great producer of live events, let's say, right? And in order for me to start that process, I have to start to just get take this stuff seriously. Like, I'm sitting in front of my thing, I've got my lights set up, I've got to make sure that I show up on time, I'm prepared, I'm doing all the things, because my mindset is I am going to be a professional live event producer, right? Is that my title right now? No. Am I making money off of it? No. But every time that I'm behind the mic or in front of a screen, I'm a professional person, a content creator that wants to do the best job possible at all times. So it's really about that kind of a mindset. In the same way, you know, building, like when I started as a yoga instructor as well, there were many times when I would take the seat of the teacher. I had an opportunity to sub for somebody or teach like a handful of people who wanted a yoga class. I was at that moment a yoga instructor, whether or not I had my certification at that time, as I was moving into the realm of doing things, right? So if I were to be writing it down, if I didn't have any certifications at that time, I didn't have all these other things, but I was working towards that. And I think that's what Gordon is getting at too, that we have. And also I think that there's another layer, and I don't know if it's going to be part of that outline here too, where when you're starting off, you don't have as much cash flow for many folks to invest in a lot of these things. So maybe you can only buy a microphone. Maybe you can only pay for your podcast hosting. Maybe you have to cut corners a lot of the time. But at minimum, know this is coming in the future. If these steps go forward, this is where we're going to be. This is where we're going next, right? So have that top of mind to know, so that you're not like, oh, I want to be a business now. Wait, what? I need to invest all this money? I had no idea, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah, you know, well, I think what we're really talking about is sort of laying foundations so that you can build from there, and having that business entity, having the bank account, all those things are foundational things. And, you know, success, the famous trope, I guess you could say, is nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? If you don't take risks from time to time, you're not going to achieve very much. You'll move forward a little bit, sure, but big success tends to come from big, bold actions, and that means taking some risks. And having the confidence to take those risks, oftentimes knowing that you've laid those foundations, is what gives you that confidence. And so when I say thinking like a business, that's the beginning step. You can design a house on paper. You can sit down with a piece of paper and draw out your ideal dream house, but you can't build it until you get the architectural drawings and do the engineering and then build the foundation for the house before you start building the structure above ground, and all of it's the same thing. That's really what I'm getting at here.
Yep. Yeah, unless you want to build like a hut, like a cave person did, and you just jump into it and you start throwing sticks and leaves over top.
Go for it.
Hope it works out, like on Survivor. Shout out to Bree Survivor. By the way, I think reality TV is the future of all entertainment. I'm just gonna throw it out there. I think all of us are.
Where did that come from?
Survive. I think that we're all social media superstars, which is reality TV at either its finest or its worst.
Trevor's stream of
Um,
consciousness.
Oh my! I was like, wait, what?
You should have your own show, Trevor, called Stream of Consciousness.
Yes.
True story. I had a show called Reintroducing Trevor that I wanted to do once a week, but I got too busy with other stuff, and it was supposed to be just that.
Interesting.
Let's talk about metrics and investment. I know that's where Bree wants us to go,
Yep.
and I want to start with investment of time and then work our way to money quickly, obviously. But where should people be investing the most of their resources to build that foundation? Because I think when we talk about investing and we talk about the people that get into the, it's oftentimes people that don't have much time and don't necessarily have a huge nest egg set aside for it. Elsie, where does one start with their time and or money?
My God. All right. So I think that one of the biggest lessons that I learned now in year 16 of doing this thing is that I, invest, I think, at the beginning in things that you can use in the long run, right? That was one of the biggest things. I think I was just looking back, I was listening to another podcast, and it made me think of the very first big investment that I made in podcasting was in 2006. I bought a MacBook. That was like the biggest up level of investment in one device that I did then. At that time, I didn't have very much money, like at all. Like it was like almost zero. I cannot even remember how I even managed to buy this. I think that I must have booked a job or something, or I got like a tax return and I was like, I'm going to buy this MacBook. And that MacBook was the fundamental foundation for me in being able to do everything else, because it didn't matter what microphone I was using. It didn't matter what software I was using. Everything at that time was easier going into using a Mac. Everything was using a Mac. And I was like, oh my God. So that opened up the world to me, to being able to do easier editing. At that time, I was using, for sure, GarageBand, hands down. I was using iMovie, hands down, because that was the easiest thing. And there was nothing like that it was that was as easy in other platforms. So that got me going right away. To me, at this point too, even getting this set up in here, without my Mac Mini, I wouldn't be able to run all of these things. So I'm always thinking about that core big, not even big as in like a lot of money, but that one thing that the other things won't work without, right? Because you'll start to realize that as you start to add more complexity into the mix, you're going to end up having to invest more money if you didn't from the get-go figure out what that foundational investment that you can build on is going to be. So for me, the hardware aspect of it was a big investment to creating that foundation. And that allowed that expansion. Now I'll send it over to Gordon for thinking about it from the business perspective, from the sense of like establishing those entities outside of hardware, which is what I tend to live in.
Well, but I mean, I think you're really talking, when you talk about hardware, you're really talking about the tools to do the actual output of the work. And, I'm well aware that having an LLC or a corporation or having a contract isn't really a productivity tool in the sense that it makes it easier to get this episode out today.
Mm-hmm.
What it does do is it makes it easier to have the longevity and to turn getting this episode out into generating revenue or generating profit, or really just having a rewarding experience over the long term. And so, look, of course, put first things first. You can't make a podcast without a microphone. You can make a podcast without an LLC. And so if you're just getting in just at the very ground level, testing the water, no, you don't form a company first. You try making some episodes. And so you buy the microphone and you plug it into the computer and you hire do the hosting service and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say that the LLC is your first $1,000 you spend, but maybe it's the third. $1,000 that you spend on things after you've gotten some momentum or when you're sure it's going to be a go. And if you're launching a business, if you're coming at it saying that this is going to be a business, we're going to do podcasts, that's when some of these things become a higher priority. And especially if you're going to have a team or you're going to be hiring employees, those kinds of things. And, when it comes to when to, should you do it yourself? Should you have someone else do it? There's a lot of questions in our outline that I'm looking at. That's going to be a judgment call. At some point, when it comes to where do you invest in things, sometimes you're investing your money, and sometimes you're investing your time and energy and sleepless nights and those kinds of things. And ultimately, it has to be a decision of what's the most valuable to you. Is your dollar worth more to you than your minute or than your 10 minutes of time? Or is your time more valuable than the money it would cost to have somebody else do the things or to buy the resource, the tool that helps you make the thing? The old saying about if you're going to chop down a tree, spend most of your time sharpening the axe. Same as, look, invest your energy where it's most beneficial for the long run. And I can't give you the answer for you. I can tell you how I do things, so.
Yeah. I appreciate both of you taking us on that little trip. That was solid with the hardware. Obviously, super necessary if you're hoping to have quality stuff come out, especially if it's packaged. Anytime you can get a package deal, that's like something to cover more than just one need, I guess is what I mean by that. So a good cell phone goes a long way in 2023 creation because of the camera and the audio on them. Good pair of headphones goes a long way. But then, of course, like if your computer can't keep up with what you're running, not useful. If you are not prepared to make money and don't have a bank account, not useful. So I think everything you laid out was the perfect starter kit. Jen wants to know if we should be paying guests. No, I think that's how we feel about it. If we were going to blanket statement, I think the feeling is no, but I think that it also depends because there's a lot of very unique shows that have very different premises out there. So I think that there's probably a version where we might say yes, but Elsie, you're a no on this, right?
I'm a no. Yes. That never really came up prior. Again, there's an evolution, I think, to our culture, and there is an understanding of payment in a lot of different reasons. I'm not saying that there is one way of doing things at all. If your business plan is around making sure that you are paying people to come on your show, awesome, right? Also recognizing, I think one thing that goes a long way is to recognizing expertise, recognizing time and resources for the people who are coming on, and making sure that you treat them that like their time matters. And this is very important. I think that goes a long way with a lot of people. And making sure that it's a professional experience for them. I'm not of the ilk to be paying guests at this time. But if you can make a case for it, good on you. And in terms of thank yous and whatnot, again, if you say to me, you're coming on to my show from 12 to 12:30, if you can pay me by keeping me there from 12 to 12:30. Yeah. Instead of 12 to 12:45 or, oh, sorry, we went over, or not getting the information. Like you can pay me back by making sure that you can provide those resources for me, to respect my time.
Yeah.
That's it, right? And I don't expect anything else other than that. I'm happy to show up anywhere, anytime. But if you don't respect my time, not that I want money for this, but I'm saying that makes me go like, I'm not sure I want to do that again. So
yeah, I mean, as I've appeared as a guest in situations where I've been paid for my time, and I've appeared as a guest on lots of things where I haven't, and it's just. Again, it sort of depends on the business model of the show and also the value proposition for me. If somebody wants me to come and teach a class about copyright law for an hour, and it's to an audience that isn't really my core market of people, I'm going to have to ask, hey, what's in it for me? However, if it's good for me and if I get benefit, of the exposure, the visibility, mentioning my products and services in the comments and those kinds of things, then I'm more inclined to do things for less or none. And again, respect my time and provide some value one way or the other. Do I care about a thank you gift? I'm actually drinking from a cup that was sent to me this is actually from a client, but I get these kinds of gifts from people who, after I appear on their show, and it's very nice. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy, but I don't expect it.
Yeah.
And I personally don't do it either. Sometimes I send a note or something like that just to be a gracious host, and that's good. So
beautiful. Well, I appreciate you taking on that question. I have never been paid for it, but I'm new to the world, so I don't expect it. And yeah, I think that everything is different. I'm sure people on TV get paid to be guests all the time. So we are constantly reassessing what these things mean. And I appreciate you both answering that question. And Gordon, really appreciate your transparency, because it's interesting to know like this, that it is possible, because people say it, that you can get paid to be a speaker or paid to be a guest. And it's not always clear that that's a real thing that happens, because so many people say it and you don't actually see it too often, at least in every day. So that was very powerful. I want to pass along, as we wrap up here, one resource that I want to recommend people check out, other than the two humans that are on the screen right now. If you have further questions, which you definitely do, there is absolutely no way that we answered all of them, but I want to shout out producer Jemmy, who is super active on LinkedIn, and she has been cranking out the most foundational 30-second, 2-minute clips like for the past year, and I want to show her some love for that, because she is really, really helpful in that way. And then I'll pass it to each of you as I say thank you. Maybe shout out one resource in your universe that if people have more questions about how to get to the hustle phase, where maybe you're making some money in a legal way, where should they check out in addition to your own selves? I'll start with you, Elsie, and we'll end with you, Gordon, to wrap up the hobby to hustle, protecting yourself in the creator economy, Fuzzy Lawgic.
I would just say, in all honesty, listen to podcasts. I mean, I know that's like probably a cop out in some way, shape, or form, but really, just you can search for them so easily nowadays. There's so many podcast apps out there that can really provide that. I would find podcasts that are talking about all of the nuances around all sorts of things around business. I mean, there's a plethora of stuff out there. And if it's not a podcast and you find a producer like on Twitter or on Instagram or on Facebook, see if they have a podcast. There's so many people that are talking about these conversations already. See a thread you like, see if they have a podcast. And I'm only saying that because there's a lot more nuance involved. I know, Gordon does a lot of fantastic stuff on his YouTube channel as well as on his podcast that he really talks about deeply in there. You really just have to subscribe to his show. And I'm serious. I mean, I know he's obviously my co-host here, but it's like, it's so easy to find all of this information already. And maybe you don't hire Gordon, but you'll now know the vocabulary that you need to search for. You'll now know what to even look for in whatever your next step is. And it's free. Most of the time, it's free to get that information. Go, Gordon.
Wow. Thank you so much for that, Elsie. I'm going to shout out a couple of other podcasters who aren't on your screen at this moment, and just people that I respect, and I think they provide great value. Dave Jackson, a colleague of Elsie, does some great stuff in the space. He does I think it's Saturday morning show, Ask the Podcast Coach, if you're looking for tips there.
Coach, correct.
And he and his co-host, who's that, Jim, they do a wonderful job with that. Dave has written books on how to make money from podcasting, those kind of things. Great tips there. The guys that do New Media Show, love them or hate them, they do great stuff too. Bring a lot of perspective and good information. So the New Media Show, and if you're into the YouTube space, Think Media is a great channel to follow, and those guys do a terrific job.
Always
so Sean,
goals for me. Think Media. I'm like, I want to do what they do with their stuff. They're so great.
Yeah.
Such great.
And actually watching how they did it, what their business looks like today, and how it's built over the last 7 to 10 years, I think it is. Sean Cannell really built this thing from the ground up, and he talks about how he did it, and it's great news, great information. So
awesome.
those are my
Thank you both so much for that input. I just want to make sure people are continuing the conversation. That is our mission. That is our vision. Please do not stop talking about ethics. Please do not stop talking about how to lift people up that have a smaller voice than you, because that is where you should focus. As Elsie said, first, focus on the hard stuff first. Serve the people who are most different than you first. And if you can serve that person, you can probably serve anybody. So thank you both so much for another riveting conversation about the social, the legal, and the ethical side of media and the creator economy. We are looking forward to being back here next week next week is the Elsie takeover. Elsie takeover next week, because Gordon is out.
That's right. I won't be here.
Oh my. I'm like, what?
Surprise!
But we talked about it last time, so we have a plan that we will remind you of via email.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I don't
for
remember
sure.
other than what's in front of my face, people.
No, that's no
That is
problem
what
at all.
it is
That's
to happen.
that is what it is to run an SNL like unscripted somewhat show, is that we are always on fire with new hot takes. And next week it's going to be an Elsie focused show, topically a little bit more so than normal, and I'm excited for that because we love hearing from you. Elsie, Gordon, if you're able to stop in, of course we'll gladly take you, so we look forward to seeing you too. Big shout out to Bree for everything she's doing in the background. Thank you as always to my moms, and thank you to all the moms. It was a good mom episode, and I just want to appreciate really the fact that you come back and lead us after you do all the things that moms are expected to do and somehow still get done. Like, thank you. Like, we would be nothing without moms. That being said, see you next week. Thanks, Bree.